So now it's time for me to introduce the first guest speaker for today. So I promise I'll try to keep her introduction brief, but if you're in my shoes, I'm sure you'll understand that's going to be a pretty hard job. She has a really, really impressive overarching record of achievements. Let's just start with her sporting achievements. Annabelle Williams is a 5-time world record holder in Paralympic swimming. Yes, you heard that right, 5-time world record holder. Additionally, she's been a TV presenter, she's been a former corporate lawyer, she's been a board director, she's been a legal counsel for the Australian Olympic Committee, she's been a recipient of the Order of Australia. Let me catch my breath. I don't even think I got through everything, but hopefully she can forgive me for that. But she is, to top it all off, a fantastic orator and international motivational speaker. But if I was to say something that's outside of all this, or outside of all of her achievements that you can see on a paper, it's the fact that she has such an infectious energy and generosity in spirit. For someone who has achieved so much, as I'm sure you could see from all the stuff I was saying, she carries herself with such humility and such a welcoming warmth, which will really come through when she talks. Which is why today we feel so privileged to have her here with us today, as she's going to speak to you about cultivating a growth mindset. Before I welcome her, I'll just add, please put any questions you may have in the Q&A box. We'll try to get around to some of them at the end. We actually do have a 30-minute interactive Q&A session following her talk. Also, as you can see on the shared screen, there's a link to her website. So I'll give you a moment, guys, to note that down and some of her socials. Hopefully you guys have got that down. So now we just wanted to hand over to Annabelle. We didn't want to waste any further time. Over to you.
Hello, Damesh. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello.
We can. Yes, we can.
Hi, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. It is such a pleasure to be here, and so lovely to be with you all. I'm just pressing my. It wouldn't be a Zoom conference without a technical glitch. I'm trying to press my video, and it's just saying unable to start because the host has stopped it. So I'm not sure if perhaps there's something that you can do on your end to bring up the video, but I will commence nonetheless. I think that was such a beautiful way to start the session. I was fortunate to be here and catch at least the last part of the meditation, and that was just wonderful. And what an incredible way to start for everyone. And I know you guys have a really amazing lineup for the rest of the day, and I think it's just so wonderful that you have this community. And it really is a pleasure, as I said, to be.
You can share screen now, actually.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
brilliant.
wonderful.
Yay.
Hi, everyone.
Wow.
Here I am. I can see myself. Okay, that's excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope everyone is going okay out there. I know this is not the easiest of times, and it's hugely unprecedented. But I hope you're all managing to find some safety and some peace, despite the uncertainty of this particular moment in our history. And I'm particularly excited to be speaking to you because I absolutely love speaking to young people. You are my favourite group of people to speak to. I think there's just so much ahead of you to look forward to, and you have the most incredible energy, and you're curious, and you're open-minded, and you're great problem solvers. I know you may not feel that way all the time, and especially now, days may feel more challenging at the moment, but you are all of those things, and you are very big thinkers, and you are extremely creative, and you have the ability to be very agile. And those are the things that are all required in what I'm going to talk to you about today, which is a growth mindset. And when I was looking at the wonderful brochure and creatives around this event, there was one that really struck a chord for me. So I think I might read it out. On the website, when the organisers of this event were speaking about the Youth 2.0 Oceania Summit, and there were the bubbles, you might recall, with the colours, and when you hovered over the colours, it gave an explanation of that particular colour. And I think the blue one really resonated for this particular topic. It said, we are born with some things already on our canvas. How do we create the artwork that we want, despite our canvas already being full of impressions by the time we're ready to start painting ourselves? That really resonated with respect to a growth mindset. And for some of you who may not have noticed yet or may not be able to see, I'm actually missing my left hand and forearm. I always find this very funny over Zoom conferences. It's almost like a show and tell, like I have to show that I was born with one hand, but that was the canvas that I was born. That's the way I was born. And it was extremely unexpected. Back then, a million years ago, I'm much older than all of you, my parents didn't know that I was going to be born like that. The ultrasounds were not clear enough. And so the day that I was born was the day they found out. And I'm very fortunate that I was born into a family that never saw me as a problem. I mean, there were definitely points in my life where my family did see me as a big problem, but I don't think it had anything to do with the fact that I only had one arm. It was more all those typical teenage years that I'm sure none of you are going through. But having lived with a disability for more than 30 years, I have developed determination and resilience and grit, but I really do feel that I've developed those qualities because time and time again, day after day, I have had to bounce back from failure and adversity. I really have faced daily challenges since the day I was born. And I believe that we all have pivotal moments in our life, moments that shape us as people. And some of those moments are clear before they even happen. The day you start school, or the day you graduate from college, the day you get married, or the day you have a baby. But there are some pivotal moments that you don't realize are life-altering without the benefit of hindsight. And it's some of those moments that I'm going to share with you today. Some of the moments that instilled in me an inner strength that I feel very fortunate to have. They're the moments that helped me realize that the hand that I was dealt, pun intended, was just the very start for my development. So what is a growth mindset? The concept was coined by a lady called Carol Dweck, who's a Stanford University psychologist. And it's this concept that our basic qualities are things that can be cultivated and enhanced through efforts and strategies and with help from other people. And it's compared to a fixed mindset. And in a fixed mindset, people believe that their qualities are carved in stone. And no matter how much work or effort or energy they put in, they can't change the situation or that hand they've been dealt. So I thought I should make a couple of things clear. First of all, a very key ingredient to a growth mindset is support. And that can come from anywhere. A huge amount of that support for me came from my family, from my parents in particular, and my grandmother, who I'll speak a little bit about. But there have been small acts of kindness and courage throughout my life from complete strangers. And that has also really helped to shape my mindset. And this group, you only need one person for support. You need one person. You don't need hundreds of people. You need one person, and you can find that person. You don't have to be born into a family where that person exists. I know that's not the case for some people. So this group can act as your support network. And I think that that is just one of the most fabulous things about this network. I also think it's important to say that having a growth mindset does not mean that life is always easy. It's absolutely not. And despite the fact that I have tried to cultivate a growth mindset for 32 years, this particular time has been very unsettling for me. I started a new business 8 months ago, which required me to travel all over the world, speaking at very large conferences. And so, of course, none of those things exist right now. And so I've had to call very deep on my courage and see that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and figure out how to be agile and how to pivot my business in a way that's going to make sense for the current situation and the world moving forward. So I am resilient and I am gritty, but those things take a lot of work, and it's work that is required on a daily basis. Our mindset is not really a binary thing. It's not the case that you are always going to be in a growth mindset or always going to be in a fixed mindset. Different situations and various points in our lives might dictate what mindset we're in at various points. But the more you work on it, the more likely you are to ground yourself in a really positive growth mindset. So when I was a little girl, I remember that I felt different. I knew that I was different to other little children, but I very, very clearly remember the day I realized that I was actually disabled. It was my first ever sports competition. And I remember as we walked in, it was a swimming carnival, and as we walked into the swimming carnival, there was a banner at the entrance of the pool. And it said, on the banner, it said, this event is being organised by the Sports Council for the Disabled. And I remember looking at the sign and seeing the word disabled and thinking, why am I competing here? Am I disabled? I had never really thought that I was, and I'd never really actually thought about what that might mean. And so at the end of the swimming competition, I went home and I took out my thesaurus from my bookshelf and I looked up the word disabled. And I'm going to read out loud the words that I saw written on the page. Next to disabled, it said, challenged, diseased, ill, incapacitated, sick, unfit, unhealthy, unsound, and unwell. And underneath the definition of disabled, it had the antonyms, you know, the opposite of those words. And the antonyms for disabled were fit, healthy, robust, whole, well, and wholesome. And I remember taking the thesaurus downstairs to show my parents, and I started reading the words associated with disabled. I started reading them out loud to my mum and dad. And I got about halfway through the words and this lump lodged in my throat. I remember thinking, how could these words relate to me? I remember thinking, wasn't I whole or wholesome? And at that moment, my mum, she prized the thesaurus out of my hand and she tore the page out of the thesaurus and threw it in the bin. And I remember I was crying and she sat me down and she looked at me. I remember she sat so close to me and she looked me in the eye and she said, Annabelle, it does not matter what is written in that book. You will only ever be constrained by your mind. That was a really pivotal moment for me. The realization from someone who I admired and loved that despite my physical limitations, or, you know, the fact that I was missing one hand, that was not going to in any way inhibit my abilities, that I was only going to be stopped by what was going on in my mind and my imagination. And as far as I was aware, my mind was just as good as anyone else's. And so my mum, of course, didn't know the term growth mindset at the time, but that's what she was instilling in me. She was saying to me, you know, don't see yourself in those fixed terms. She was saying that the way you see yourself is the way that other people will see you. And so from that day forward, I wanted to be seen as someone who was capable and able, and all of those other things, you know, fit, healthy, robust, well, whole, and wholesome. But then, of course, there was school, where that concept and that belief, that inner belief, was challenged regularly. I want to tell you a story about a little boy. And on the grounds that it might incriminate him, I won't tell you his name. So this particular boy, who may or may not have been called Todd, He asked me one day when we were about 10 years old if he could sit next to me the next day at lunch. And as a 10-year-old at school, that is as close as you're going to get to being asked out on a date. So I was particularly excited to be asked to sit next to Todd. And Todd was also the fastest runner in our whole school. So I really saw him as like an alpha 10-year-old. So this was a big deal for me. And so I went home that night and I said to my family, I have a lunch date. And I was super excited, and I asked my mum the next morning to tie my hair in an extra high ponytail. And I remember walking through the gates at school full of confidence, and I couldn't wait until lunch. And as the bell rang for lunch and we all walked outside, and I told all of my girlfriends that they had to sit in a circle very close by, and he told his group of guy friends that they also had to sit in a circle very close by, and Todd and I sat sharing a sandwich on a bench, having what I can only imagine was a very awkward conversation. But I remember really enjoying the lunch and thinking that it was completely fine and lovely. But at the end of lunch, Todd stood up and he said in front of everyone, in front of all of my friends, in front of all of his friends, that he would never sit next to me again because he thought it was so weird that I only had one arm. I remember feeling so alone, and I did not want to be there anymore. I could feel the tears start to well up in my eyes, and I just wanted to run away. I went home that night and I said to my parents and my grandma that I was never going back to school again. I didn't think I could face it. I felt like what Todd had said was, I thought he was sort of voicing what everyone else thought. I thought everyone thought I was weird and that people were just pretending to be my friends, but actually that was the way everyone felt. And it was my grandma who said this to me. My grandma had overcome a huge amount of adversity in her own life. She was a widow at the age of 25 with 2 young children, my mum and my uncle. Her husband, my grandfather, died very suddenly in a car accident. And she was my soulmate, really, and my total hero. She taught me so much about resilience. And she said to me that night, she said, sometimes we have to do the things we don't want to. She said, you have to go back to school the next day. You have to go back to school tomorrow. We cannot run away from our fears. And so she walked me to school the next day. And I remember right before I walked through the gates, she leant down to me and she gave me 2 kisses. She gave me a kiss on this cheek and she said, this kiss gives you our love. And then she gave me a kiss on this cheek and she said, this kiss gives you the courage to be brave. And I remember trying to muster all the bravery and courage that I could and walked through these gates feeling super, super vulnerable. And in our first class of the day, my teacher, whose name was Miss Clark, she had no doubt heard what had happened the day before, but she didn't speak to me directly about it. But when we all settled down in class, she told our class that the first exercise we were going to do for the day was a creative exercise. And we had to draw a superhero. And the superhero had to have a disability. And by the end of the class, there were 25 superheroes that all had one arm. And I thought they were pretty awesome. And my teacher took them all and she hung them at the front of our classroom for the whole year. And every morning I would swan past Todd, gazing at these 25 superheroes that all had one arm. Miss Clark was on my team. She made me feel like a hero. And she made me think that actually no one was thinking I was weird. Everyone thought I was a superhero as well. And I'm sure she made Todd feel about 2 centimeters tall, which is not the moral of the story, but always made me feel pretty good. But that is the power that just one person has to change someone's life, really, to change the trajectory that they're on, to give someone hope and an opportunity to be more. And It was another example where slowly I started building my confidence thanks to the support from others, from my parents, my teacher, some friends, my neighbours. They knew that these sorts of things had the potential to just chip away at my confidence. But thanks to them, I felt like I had this team of supporters. Every knock to my confidence and challenge that I was presented was met in equal measure with the love and support and kindness and encouragement from this team. We would brainstorm together. They gave me the space to feel vulnerable and upset and hurt. And they equipped me with the tools to be strong and to be brave. I was very lucky that those people did not see my limitations. They just saw opportunities to help me grow. And I started to realize that these things that were happening to me regularly because of my disability and the lessons that I was learning along the way, those things had the ability to either drag me right down or to build me right up. And so I decided, it was a conscious decision in my mind. I told myself that every knockdown was going to make me more determined. Learning how to tie my hair, learning how to tie my shoelaces, learning how to play a PlayStation with one hand. All of those things are things that children with two hands just take for granted. And they were things that I really had to grapple with. And I had to become very good at problem solving. But I made a very conscious decision that I was going to do it. So if we fast forward a little while, I made my first Australian swim team in 2005. I had always loved sport. I grew up loving every kind of sport. My earliest memories are going to the cricket and the rugby with my dad, and I just loved it. And I also felt like I found a community of people in sport. I met people who had a disability as well, and that made me, people who were slightly older than me who I looked up to, and it made me feel this sense of inclusion and belonging. And so I was very fortunate to make my first Australian team when I was in year 11, my second last year of high school. And I had the most incredible 8 years as a member of the Australian team. I had a lot of highs. I was the captain of the team in Beijing in the 2008 Paralympics. And I was fortunate to win some medals, including a gold medal in London at the 2012 Paralympics. But I also had some real challenges, and I'll tell you about one of those in a little while. But I had a lot of lows, and there were a lot of times where I felt like I failed. But one thing that I feel so lucky to have is, I met just the most extraordinary people along the way. People who have had to deal with serious, serious trauma, but who had the power of their mind to overcome their situation and not lament their predicament, but to go on and achieve incredible feats. And I think the extent to which people can have a growth mindset was made so clear to me on the first day of the Beijing Paralympics. At the Olympic or Paralympic Games, there's always a dining hall or a food hall, which has kind of become legendary. Often I'm asked more questions about the food hall than I am about my gold medal. But the food hall at an Olympic or Paralympic Games is amazing. It's the size of 10 football fields. There is food from all over the world. There's a McDonald's. It's pretty great. And I remember walking into the food hall on the first day feeling overwhelmed by the choice and, people from all different backgrounds with all different disabilities. And I went and got some food, and I went and sat down on a chair at a table. And I was just on my own, and I looked across, and there was a man sitting a couple of seats away from me who was wearing a Chinese team uniform. And I looked at him. He was missing both of his arms at the at the shoulder. So he had no arms at all. Both his arms were missing at the shoulders. And I looked at him, and I looked at the table in front of him, and on his table, he had a laptop that was closed. The lid of the laptop was closed, and a bowl of ramen and chopsticks that were still inside. They were those little wooden chopsticks that were still inside their paper holder. And so I looked at him, and then I remember looking around to see if anyone was going to come and help him because he had no arms. And I realized that actually no one was coming. And so I thought, maybe there's something I can do to help. So I stood up and I went to move towards him. And just as I was about to take a step across, he put his feet up on the table. He opened his laptop with one foot and started touch typing, way better than I can touch type. And then with his other foot, he took the chopsticks out of their holder, snapped them in half, and started eating ramen with chopsticks. And I sat down and I thought, I have a disability and have been seriously underestimated by people my whole life. And I underestimated what he was capable of. And it was a realization to me that I should never, ever think I know what people's limits are. And it was another lesson. The other thing I thought was, the things that you think you actually can't do, Annabelle, are things you probably can do. You're just not employing the lesson your mum taught you all those years ago, that you're only limited by your mind. At some point in his life, that man decided that he could use chopsticks and that he could touch type with no arms. And you know what? It turns out that he could do both of those things. And so, and that is just one example of many, many instances where I have seen people employ this growth mindset. And that's been very inspiring to me. And when I think I can't do something, or when I find something a challenge and I think it's too hard and I can't overcome this challenge, I think back to stories like that, and it gives me a lot of strength to actually push forward. And that's not to say that that would have come easily for him. It absolutely would not have. I can only imagine the effort required on his part and the problem solving and the support to get to that point. I imagine it was very intense. I'm sure he also tried and failed and tried again and failed again so many times. And of course, failures hurt and they can be super frustrating, but it is the aftermath of a failure that determines whether or not it was a moment of growth. So I'm going to tell you, at that Games in Beijing, I had a moment that I thought was the biggest failure of my lifetime. It was the 50-meter freestyle, and it was my main event. I had trained for 4 years for that one race. I had dedicated so much time and so much energy, and other people had as well. People had really committed to helping me get to the Games and win a gold medal in that race. And in the heat, in swimming, you swim the heats in the morning and the finals in the evening. And in the heat in the morning, I swam a time that ranked me first for the final. I had the center lane. And there were 8 hours between the heat and the final. And I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit this now, but I was so confident and so hopeful that I almost saw the gold medal as a sure thing. In the 8 hours between the heat and the final, when I should have been visualizing the race itself, which was a technique, visualization was a technique that I used a lot during my swimming years and has helped me a lot subsequently. But instead of visualizing the race, I remember that I was visualizing myself on the victory lap. I was imagining the adoring fans, that they would be throwing garlands of flowers over the balustrades. I was imagining seeing my family and friends. I thought I'd get a phone call from the Prime Minister. I mean, I really just thought that I was going to win the gold medal. And I remember walking out onto pool deck that night and looking up into the crowd and seeing 20,000 people. And I felt so overwhelmed. I was only 19 years old at the time, and I physically felt something inside of me shift. It was as if everything started moving in slow motion. And I felt like I wanted to say to the starter, I just need another 5 minutes. Can you just give me another 5 minutes? But that's not how sport works. And before I knew it, we were standing up on the blocks, and I remember looking down at the water, and it just looked so far away. It was almost as if the whole pool was pulsating around me. And the starter's gun went, and I don't remember anything about the race. But I remember touching the wall, and I looked around and I saw that I'd touched fourth. zero point zero 0.04 of a second behind the third place getter. And fourth place is the hardest place to come. Just missing out on a medal by that small margin was so painful. There's a book called What the Dog Saw by an author called Malcolm Gladwell. And in that book, he talks about the difference between choking and panicking. Choking is when you overthink something, and panicking is when you don't think enough about something. And I have thought about that race so many thousands of times since 2008. And I still don't know if I choked or if I panicked, but in that moment, it didn't matter. The race was over. I had failed. In my mind, I'd completely choked, and I'd let so many people down. People who had invested so much time, so much energy, so much compassion and kindness in me. And I remember pulling myself up out the side of the pool and going to speak to the media, which is a requirement of all athletes. And in my mind, I just kept thinking, that was 4 years of my life. That was hundreds of 4 a.m. starts. That was dozens and dozens of injuries. That was so much practice in the gym. It was an enormous amount of sacrifice, and it was over. And so after I spoke to the media, there was a change room nearby, and I went and I sat down in there, and there was no one in the room, and I sat on my own to contemplate what had just gone wrong. And after a couple of minutes, another girl walked in, and she'd been in that same race with me. She also had the same disability. She was missing her left arm, and she'd come 7th in that race. And she could see I was upset, and came and sat next to me and asked if everything was okay. And I said, everything's fine. I'm just disappointed with that race. And I remember she asked, is your family here? And I said, yes, my parents are here and my auntie and uncle. And I remember she looked at me and said, you just competed in the final at a Paralympic Games, and your parents are here to support you. You should feel so proud of yourself. And she said it with so much kindness. And I remember thinking, yes, you're right, but that's not how I feel right now. All I feel is this huge sense of failure. And I didn't know it at the time. I learned it a few days later, but that girl had acquired her disability in a car accident 4 years earlier. And in the accident, both of her parents had been killed. What we sometimes see as a failure is actually an opportunity to learn and to grow. I could have been on the podium in that exact moment, receiving a medal and singing the national anthem, but I would not have learned as much if I was doing that. I learned that failures are actually our defining moments. I'm still not sure how she mustered the courage and the kindness to say those things to me on that day, but I will be forever grateful for the impact that she's had on my life. And I can only imagine the personal growth she would have had to go through to get to the point where she could have that kind of compassion and humility. I'd now like to share with you my favourite part of my time really as a Paralympian. Well, I don't know if I'd say my favourite, but one of my very favourite moments. Certainly the biggest high I've been on. It was the 4x100 medley relay, and this was the last race on the last day of competition in London. It was my last ever race for Australia, and I knew that at the time. I knew going into it that this was it. I was never going to compete for Australia again. 8 years, so many competitions, so much travel, so many opportunities to meet new people, and this was the very last race. And I was really proud to be doing a relay as my last race with 3 other girls who had all acquired their disabilities in different ways. One girl had lost her leg to cancer. One girl had been born with cerebral palsy. We all had our own story. And we'd all been told so many times in our lives that something was not going to happen. Something was kind of impossible. And this race was no exception. We were ranked 5th going into this race, into this final, 5th. And right before we walked to the marshalling area, our head coach said to us, "You're an outside chance of a bronze medal, but it'll be really hard work to get that bronze." And I remember as we walked away, one of the girl who'd lost her leg to cancer when she was 6, she said, "A chance is still a chance. Nothing is impossible." And so with that, Divya or Dharmesh, I'd love if you could please play the video.
Yes, we'll get that right on the screen in a second. Yep.
Cole, Downey, Williams, Frenny, what a team. Team Australia, they go in lane number 2. Fredrickson away well and into her stroke, still underwater in lane number 2. It's Williams for Australia. Is the lead big enough over Australia? It could well be, unless 7 will dive in, but it is in the name of Jacqueline Frenny. The most successful swimmer in the pool is about to dive in now for Australia. Jacqueline Frenny is away. Kangasiva from the Russian Federation, hold on. I think the lead is going to be enough, but Jacqueline Frenny is absolutely charging. But so too is Wegerman, Mallory Wegerman in lane 5. This is going to be absolute drama down the last length. As the Russian Federation, Oksana Gasiva is being caught. Jacqueline Frenny could well run out of water. Look at Mallory Wegerman, 23 years of age. She's an S8, a class up on her rivals. This is going to be dramatic stuff now. There's 15 metres to go, and here comes Great Britain. Louise Watkin of Great Britain. They're all neck and neck now. There's 3 metres to go. It's a blanket finish. It goes to lane number 2. Oh my word, 4:53.95. I've not seen anything like that before. What drama in the pool. They cannot believe it. Australia from lane 2. The Paralympic champions, London 2012.
Thank you. Between the 4 of us, we had been told hundreds and hundreds of times that something was unlikely to happen, pretty impossible, that we physically couldn't do something. But that is the power of the mind. It's seen in sport all the time. There is logic and numbers, but then there's hope and there's determination and there's teamwork. A champion team will beat a team of champions every time. And I'm often asked if I wish I had won an individual gold medal, because that's considered to be more prestigious in a sport like swimming. And the answer is no. I am so proud to have won that gold medal with those 4 girls. It really taught me the meaning of happiness when it's shared. And I also know that if we had not had success in that race, we still would have put our arms around each other and said, well done. And how wonderful to have shared that moment in time together. And to me, that's the success. If there's one thing I'd like you to take away from today, it's this. The view that you adopt for yourself will profoundly affect the way that you lead your life. Despite the challenges that I've faced, having a disability is actually my power. It's equipped me with the skills required to navigate this one strange but glorious life. It's given me more grit, more determination, more empathy, more resilience, and the opportunity to meet incredibly inspiring people. And for that, I am extremely grateful. We are all dealing with challenges right now, and the feelings we're feeling are often feelings of grief. Whether or not you've lost loved ones or a job or partial income or just your old way of life, we're all dealing with adversity right now. The nature, as I said, of my business has fundamentally changed. I was flying around the world, speaking at large conferences, and then boom. I remember sitting on the couch for about 2 hours when I deleted the last thing out of my calendar, which was commentating the Tokyo 2020 Games, and taking 3 very, very deep breaths, feeling quite scared before thinking, all right, here we go. Where is this path leading me now? I better get creative. It has been really hard, but just a couple of days ago, I did a soft launch of my new brand, and I've also decided that I'm going to write a book, which is in the works. The lessons that I've learned as a person with a disability and as an elite athlete are helping me a lot. There's a lot of deep breathing, meditation. I use mantras, which help me feel really calm during times of stress. There's a lot of positive self-talk, and there are at least 3 Beyonce songs every single day. I don't know where this path is ultimately leading, and none of us know that. But I'm focused on continuing to grow as a person and to learn more about myself along the way. And that determination to work harder and to learn more, to figure out how to tackle obstacles, that allowed me to become growth-minded. Our success is not an accident, it's a choice. And whatever mindset you adopt today will determine where you are going to be tomorrow. And I know that you all have incredibly bright futures ahead of you, and I cannot wait to see where they go. Thank you very much for having me. And now,
hi, Annabelle. So we're just going to put your Mentimeter up on now.
Great.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Divya. So everyone, we can, this is a very cool new thing that I've learned about recently. But Divya is going to pop Mentimeter up, and then there are a couple of questions. You can just follow the prompt. You go to the website, which will display in a second, and you'll be given a code that you can type in, and then there's going to be 2 questions, and you don't have to think too much about it. They're not hard questions. It's not a test. And you just write your answer, and then we'll be able to see everyone's answers on the screen. And the first question, which is, I know it's not up yet, but the first question is going to be, so you can think about it in advance. It's going to be, think about the last time. When was the last time you think that you applied a growth mindset? So that's the first question. And then the second question is going to be, when was the last time you applied a fixed mindset? So here you go. When was the last time you had a growth mindset? So if you can go to www.menti.com, which is at the top of the screen there, and use the code 51435, which is also displayed at the top of the screen, and type in your answer, that would be fabulous. Last week, I love this. This is so cool. I mean, I don't think anything beats being in person, and I wish I could be with you all and sort of see you and chat to you and hug you and shake your hands and all those things that we can't do right now. But this is pretty cool that we can see it in real time. Today morning, last week, 2010, exams, pandemic style. Yes, that's challenging. This morning, exams. Last week, Friday. So there's a real range. So some people haven't felt like they've employed this growth mindset for a really long time. And I think that it was 2010, 2017, that's a while ago. Some people this morning were fabulous. Some people during exams, and that's a really great time to display a growth mindset, particularly exams during this pandemic when you're dealing with so many other things. But I think what's important to point out here is that even if you haven't employed a growth mindset since 2010, you can still start today to employ one. There have been periods of time where I thought, gosh, I don't know the last time I felt like I could actually grow or do something or be better. But your brain is like it's a muscle. So the more you exercise it, the more these things will just become second nature. What else have we got here? When I changed my career, that's really, and that's true as well. Sometimes you just need a little, well, not that changing a career is little, but sometimes, you know, you can be almost stuck in a little bit of a rut because of a situation you're in. Could be a job or a relationship or, you know, a whole range of different things. And being able to, you know, I think one of the hard things is that we have so many complex thoughts, and trying to separate out, you know, why do I feel certain ways and what's preventing me from growing and being a better version of the best version of myself is often challenging. So recognizing that something like a career may have been holding you back is a really, you know, that's super impressive that you were able to recognize that and make that kind of a change. When I lost my job in May, yes, I think as I said, this period of time is so hard for people, and people are losing jobs and loved ones and income and all of those things. And it is certainly, and I will fully admit, this is one of the hardest times I've ever been through. And it is hard. You know, sometimes you think, I just have to take this one day at a time or 1 hour at a time. And one of the techniques that I use, that I encourage you guys to use, this is another thing that my grandma taught me. She said, every night before you go to bed, you should write down someone you love. Well, I remember the way she phrased it was, you know, for us to feel happiness, all you need is someone to love, something to do, and something to look forward to. And so I'd written those things down every night for a very long time. And when COVID started, I was thinking, I'm not really sure what I'm looking forward to, and I'm not really sure what I have to do. So 2 of those 3 things were, I have a 2-year-old daughter and a husband, and, you know, so I've always had someone to love. So, but, you know, people may also not have that. And I understand if you're single and on your own and feel physically isolated, that's very challenging too. But the nature of the things that we can look forward to and the things we can do shift. So I remember one day I wrote down, the thing I'm looking forward to tomorrow is sitting in the sun and having a cup of coffee. And 6 months ago, if I'd thought that's the thing I have to look forward to, that would have made me feel sad. But at the moment, that is actually really nice. I've been able to simplify my life, and I appreciate the green leaves on the trees more. My 2-year-old stops and admires an ant for 5 minutes. And so I feel like I'm more connected to nature than I've ever been previously. And so that technique has helped me. You know, I've realized that there are positives, you know, that can come, but it is challenging. What else have we got here? Comfort is when your comfort is challenged. Yes, that's right. And it's hard to be outside your comfort zone. It's very lovely and cozy inside our comfort zone, but when you step outside of that, that is when you really sustain a lot of growth. And sometimes what is required is to sit with discomfort for a period of time, which no one likes and is not enjoyable. But then every day, the feelings will get a little bit easier. And then at some point you'll look back and you'll think, oh, that period of time where I felt terrible or I had a really, really hard time allowed me to be in this position where I love my job or I feel like I've got a lot of growth. And so I think, you know, when you're in the hard time, just always remember that there is hope. That is the most important thing. Hope is vital, and there is always so much hope. So thank you for those answers. We'll go to the next one, which is, when was the last time you employed a fixed mindset? So if you want to complete your answers now. Every day? Yeah. A lot of the time, 2019. Permanently, yeah. Last night, when my cat passed away, yeah. Often 3 years ago, yeah. So the point I'd make here is that I said at the beginning that our mindsets are not binary. You're not always in a state of a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. You know, even if you feel like you're permanently in a fixed mindset, or, you know, you're often in a fixed mindset, I would encourage you to just find little moments where you feel like, okay, you can be really deliberate and conscious about trying to employ a growth mindset. And that can just be self-talk, saying, you know what, say it might be with an exam. If you feel like, you know, I can't do it and I'm no good at this subject, you know, blah, blah, blah. Just try and say to yourself, even if you don't believe it, tell yourself that you're only allowed to say that you are really actually enjoying the subject and you're looking forward to learning more about this particular topic, because then it means you can talk about it at a dinner party, or, you know, you can research more about it, or you can journal about it. Some positive self-talk on a regular basis is that's how you exercise the muscle. That's how you exercise the growth mindset. And you can just start really small, really little things. Acceptance from others, that's a huge thing. I think there's a lot of people require external validation to feel good about themselves. So these sorts of positive self-talk, mantras, visualization, visualize yourself having succeeded in whatever the task is that you're doing. That can help you feel a lot of inner happiness and an inner peace. So thank you everyone for writing those answers. I think what we might do, and we've got a little under 10 minutes left. So what we were thinking was that you can virtually, I understand, raise your hand, and Divya is going to moderate or monitor this, but the question, well, I'm going to pose a question and you can raise your hand and answer the question, raise your virtual hand and answer the question, or you can answer, if you have a burning question you'd like to ask me based on the speech, feel free to ask anything at all. But the question I was going to pose were, you know, when you felt this fixed or growth mindset, what were the outcomes that what were the outcomes basically when you adopted those different mindsets? So feel free to answer that question, or you can ask me any question at all. And so raise your virtual hand and Divya will moderate this, and we've probably got about 8 minutes left.
Thank you so much, Annabelle. So yes, guys, so as Annabelle mentioned, this is your opportunity to say hi to her. There's a lot of messages coming in on WhatsApp, but you know, this is your opportunity to directly speak to her. So you can either put your hand up on Zoom if you know how to do that, and if you don't know how to do that, just shoot a message in the chat box or a Q&A box, and I will unmute you or read out your question to Annabelle. So I'll give you guys a couple of minutes to do that. So Annabelle, we did have a question that came in anonymously, and I was just wondering if you wanted to answer that while we got some questions from the audience. So it was a really good question, and I love that, because you do speak about the importance of your family and the role that, you know, nurture played versus nature in your life, you know. So the question was, how do you balance a personal life with such a thriving career? Which I just thought was so beautiful. So
yeah, well, that is so hard, isn't it? I mean, so I have a daughter. So the question, sorry, Divya, just so I'm clear, how do I balance a thriving career and personal life? How do I manage that?
So how did you balance your personal life when you were having such an elite career?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that there's probably maybe I'll you know, in terms of the elite career with swimming, the challenge was, of course, time. There's such a finite amount of time. But the technique that I developed, and this was also done with no sophistication. I didn't learn this from anyone. I didn't see a therapist who told me to do this. It happened organically. So when I was in year 12, my final year of school, I had the Commonwealth Games, which meant that I missed 10 weeks of year 12. And I also had a leadership position at my school, which was very time consuming. And I also wanted to do really well in my end of year exams, the high school certificate, and I wanted to become a lawyer. And I was 17 and had no idea how to balance all of those things. And I was developing a lot of anxiety and I was becoming very stressed. And I realized that when I was at swimming training, I would be worried that I should be studying. And whenever I was studying, I was worried that I should be swimming. And it was so counterproductive and I was doing nothing well. And so I said to myself, when you go to swimming training, you are not allowed to focus on anything else except for swimming training. And then when you are studying, you cannot focus on anything else except for studying. And when you're hanging out with your friends, you have to focus on enjoying that time, which sounds a bit sort of strange, but it was that sort of very deliberate thinking about and every time a thought would come into my mind that was about something else or worrying about something or getting anxious, I'd think, no, this is not the time to think about that. And so that technique, which is compartmentalizing or focus, was a technique I learned during that year, and it has served me really well into the future. And what I actually do now is, if I feel really, really anxious about something or stressed or worried, I actually schedule time in my calendar to feel anxious about that thing. So if I'm stressed about, so if you feel stressed about your job, or if you've got a really difficult, say for example, you have a really difficult boss and it's causing you a lot of anxiety, what I would do is schedule into my calendar between 2 and 3 p.m. I'd make it a private calendar invite or something anonymous so that no one understands what it means. But you know that between 2 and 3 p.m. on a Tuesday is the time for you to think about the fact that you have a terrible boss. And it means that it doesn't permeate every single aspect of your life. It doesn't sort of overwhelm you all the time. So compartmentalizing meant that I could be really deliberate and focused on the particular task at hand and do that to the best of my ability. One of the things that I was not very good at for a long time, and is still hard for me, is switching off and relaxing. And I cannot stress the importance of self-care and relaxation and time away and taking the pressure off. And you need to figure out ways that are going to work for you. So for me, that I love listening to music, and I really love running. And so I mentally can switch off during those periods. So it could be reading. I also love taking a bath or getting a massage. Like, there's lots of ways, but that's super duper important. Yeah. So that was when I was an elite athlete. I understand that some of you may have families, and I have found it more difficult. I have a daughter who's 2 years old, and she's so adorable, and she's just the joy of my life. And so it's not possible to be that, to switch on and off in the same way, and nor do I want to. And so I think that is a challenge that I'm still grappling with. And I think there's no right answer. And the nature of my work is that every week looks very different. Some weeks I'm overseas for the whole week. Some weeks I'm here and don't have any work on for a week, or, just 2 days of work during the week. And so it's just trying to find a state of equilibrium and always checking in with yourself to see how you feel and trusting your gut. Some weeks I spent, the longest I've been away from her is 2 weeks, and that was too long for me. So at that point in time, as she gets older, that may become easier. But I remember thinking, I didn't feel good about being away for this long, and so I would make sure that I'm not away for that long next time. So it's that sort of constant recalibrating and knowing that it's okay to change the situation, and it's okay to make a mistake or, make a decision that maybe wasn't the best interest of you or the people around you, but that next time you're going to make a change. I hope that answers the question.
No, that's beautiful. Thank you so much. We have another question. I'm going to unmute him, but I don't know if his audio will work. So you can just respond to him anyway. So the question is, I have a daughter that wanted to be a professional athlete in badminton. She had several injuries, and that too occurring prior to her competitions. How did you deal with your injuries and still have a hopeful mindset? So his name is Ramesh, and I'm gonna unmute him right now, just in case he can talk.
Hello, Ramesh. Hi.
Hi, Annabelle. So,
hi, Ramesh. How are you?
Thank you. By the way, wonderful talk. Really inspirational. I was touched by the video. It just gave me goosebumps right from the beginning. So thank you for sharing all your experience. So my daughter started badminton at the age of 11 and continued, but she had a mindset, exactly what you said, in terms of choking, meaning she would train really, really hard, and then right before the tournament, something would happen where she would twist her ankle or she would hurt her hamstrings, and she would not be able to go through. And I mean, I was quite discouraged. And how do you keep a growth mindset when you have a person that's not able to cope, and the body is not able to cope, and that to crucial moments. And as you know, in a sport, timing is crucial, is everything. Yeah. So maybe if you can shed some light, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And you're so right. Sport, that's one of the cruelest things about sport. The competition is set on a date, and if you're sick or have an injury, that's it. And that's the brutal reality of sport. And that happened to me so many times, Ramesh. I wish I could, speak to your daughter in person. I had so many injuries. This is not a story that I told, for timing reasons, but I actually was a runner before I was a swimmer. The 400-meter track was my main race, and I was on track to qualify for the Athens 2004 Paralympic Games. And about 8 months before those games, I developed very severe stress fractures in both of my shins. And they were so severe that the doctors said, I almost couldn't walk for a period of time. And I thought, athletics was all I had ever wanted to do. I had swum in the background as well, and I ended up but athletics was my true love. And I felt like my whole dream my dream as a little girl was competing in athletics at the Paralympic Games, and that was a complete impossibility for me. And so that was very challenging. I also think that, and one thing I never want to, I don't want people to think that it seems like I just bounced from, one challenge, got over it to the next. And challenges can last a really long period of time. And it was years before I felt okay about that. But what was required, and I think it was challenging for my parents as well, because they could see how much I wanted it. And it was the first time really that I desperately wanted something, and there was this roadblock and I just couldn't get past it. But I think the thing that helped me was, it was still very painful. There's nothing that's going to take that pain away. Time makes things better. But also I remember thinking, well, this is not actually, and this is what my parents said to me, this is not your path anymore, but there is a path out there. There's a path out there for you, and you need to have confidence that that path is going to take you somewhere wonderful. And it's unsettling because you think, also I'm someone who likes to be in control of situations, and I like to have certainty, and all of a sudden there's no certainty whatsoever. And so I remember thinking, when my parents said that to me, there's so many options out here for you now. At some point you're going to pick one, and that'll be a route that you may not have been the one you wanted, but it will lead somewhere. I remember at the time thinking, that feels too uncertain. But now, with the benefit of hindsight, I think I would never have done swimming. I would never have done a million of the things that I've subsequently done. And so, in addition to you saying that to your daughter, I think one thing that could also help is maybe telling my story. Because if I knew that there had been people who had a similar thing, like injury, and therefore they couldn't continue on that path and they had to pivot, but that their ultimate story was one that was happy and joyful, and they look back and they said actually it was a real silver lining that they had to change tack, then I would feel more confident that that was going to be my story as well. I wish I could wrap up an answer in a neat little bow, which is, of course challenging, but I think it's just from a support perspective, just always reinforcing that, you love her so much, and that she's going to have this wonderful path ahead of her. And so just providing her with a huge amount of support and encouragement. And then, you probably know her strengths better than she does. And so guiding her towards those strengths. I was also very academic and loved, creative writing and things like that. So they sort of gently guided me towards, other things or other areas that they thought might have been of interest to me.
Thank you. Thank you, Annabelle. That's really useful. Thank you very much.
Pleasure, Ramesh.
Okay, Annabelle, so we are over time, but if it's okay with you, can we just answer one more question? Is that fine with you? Okay, perfect. So
yes,
we've got a question from Neil. So the question is, hi, Annabelle, is it the adversity that has been the biggest influence on your mindset? So when you said that it was a constant process of getting back up, that was a benefit to you, which you learned with hindsight, how do we ensure that our youth have a mixture of adversity as well as nurture? As a parent, as I get older, this is the biggest challenge I find myself, especially with the benefit of hindsight myself. So that was the question. I'm going to unmute you, Neil, in case you want to talk. Go ahead, Annabelle, all yours.
Thank you. Thank you for that question, Neil. Yes. I can see the question here. When you said that it was a constant process of getting back up that was a benefit to you, okay, how do we ensure? Okay, so this is hard. So even though I'm grateful that I have, let me answer this in a more logical way. One of my friends, she's a bit older than me, is going through a divorce at the moment, and she's got 2 young children. And she said, one of her children said to her, I had a perfect life, and you've ruined my life. And I said to her, actually, that this is hugely challenging for you, for your children, for your ex-husband, all those things. But long term, it will mean that your children are much more resilient. They used to go on like fancy holidays all the time. They went to great schools. They'd had 0 adversity in their whole lives. It was just like this one wonderful, blissful existence. And actually, that's not success. Success is not, we don't want our children to grow up not having ever faced a hurdle, because they'll get to the age of 35 and be fired from their job, or some significant thing will happen, and they'll have no tools to overcome those challenges. So even though, and I'm sure when I was born, my mum in particular probably, but both my parents probably thought, oh no, what is this going to mean for her? Is she going to be okay? But now looking back, and I guess you'd have to ask my mum and dad, I think they probably are. They think, well, this was good. She had to overcome these challenges as a child when she lived under our roof, and we could be there to support and encourage and help her through. So I think that adversity is we don't obviously want our children, I think it's called snowplow parenting, when you want to snowplow in front of them and like remove every single obstacle that they might ever come across. And of course, we all have a tendency to do that. I recognize the benefit of dealing with adversity and overcoming it. Yes, I don't want my daughter to go through challenges, but I think depending on the age. And Neil, can you hear, if you can hear me and reply, how old are your children?
I've got a mixture of children. And the oldest is 27, the next one's 21, the next one's 18, and the younger one's 14. And
wow.
Yeah, they've all had,
4.
Yeah, depending on our circumstances, they've all had different styles of parenting. And yeah, I'm just trying to find that mix, because I can see it across the range, because there is such a big range between my children as well. It's something that I'm really aware of now.
I think also, I've only got one child, but some of my friends have multiple. And one of my friends was saying, oh gosh, their oldest daughter who's 2 and they've got a newborn, the newborn isn't getting the same attention and blah, blah, blah. And I said to her, I was like, every child is actually born into a different family. Like when you have the firstborn is born with 2 parents and like too much attention, the second one gets less attention, so they're all born into a different dynamic, which I think forms part of and we won't ever really know whether or not it's nature or nurture, but the characteristics that each child develops, even though they may be vastly different, and some children may be way more challenging than other children, are still like wonderful because they've had different experiences. So I think that, I hope that sort of helps. I mean, I think that adversity, they will deal with adversity at some point, like even little things like, being excluded from a playground or, not making a sports team. All of those little things are challenges. And I think it's kind of and obviously my daughter is much, much younger, but she even this morning was trying to take a lid off a pen and she could not do it. And she was sort of getting very frustrated, but I was trying to establish that, she actually could do it and try again. And I'm here to like watch, but I don't just sort of jump in and do it for her. So trying to establish independence, but be there. It's almost like being around the periphery, providing support, but sort of allowing them to guide the pace. And I think every child maybe has a different, they move at a different pace. They require different amounts of energy and attention at different points in time. And then it's kind of an evolution. But I think as parents, you, I'm sure, have a wonderful idea what you're doing because you have 4, but I have no idea what I'm doing. But I'm just trying to make sure that she grows up. The thing I want most for her is that she does make the decisions that she makes and the things that she does is because it makes her happy, not because it makes us happy. I want her to know what her truth is and to live that. A lot of people say to me, do you want Josie to be a swimmer? And I'm like, if she loves swimming, she can be a swimmer. But if she wants to be a rock musician, great. Like, you know, so I don't care what she does, how successful, how not, you know, I just want her to be happy for herself, not for anyone else.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Pleasure, Neil.
Thank you so much, Annabelle. That concludes our question answer session. And thank you so much. I'm going to hand it over to Dharmesh now, who's going to see you out of this. But from our end, I think that's about it.
Thanks, Kavya. Thanks, Dharmesh.
Thank you so much, Annabelle. It's honestly just when I was, you know, just hearing you talk, I just know that, you know, all of us were getting a bit, you know, quite emotional, honestly. Like, you know, it was so touching as well. But I feel like really you're kind of that person who really exemplifies this, painting the inner canvas. Whatever canvas you get, it doesn't matter what it is. You would just paint over it and paint it with your colors. So for you, all those times, you know, when you had, you know, you faced something at school, or, you know, you weren't able to, get the bronze medal. It was just like, I mean, for people like me, I can't even imagine those scenarios to begin with. But for us, it's just like a stop. But for you, it's just like, all right, it's time to get started now. So that's why I feel just wow. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dharmesh.
For being here. So a note to everyone, we'll be sending out some of Annabelle's links if you didn't get to take it down already, and some of the materials in an email later. So that will all be sent to you guys. So thank you so much, Annabelle.
Thank you so much, Dharmesh and Divya, and thank you everyone for having me. And I hope you just have a wonderful day. And I look forward to seeing you, you know, down the track, and hopefully at some point in person. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
So now, coming back to our journey, we've taken up the first step, picking up our paintbrush. So thanks so much for that, Annabelle, once again. She's not here, but thank you. So now we wanted to actually take this opportunity to display some of our interpretations of painting the inner canvas. So this was actually from youths all across the globe. So it's really special. They're in either written or visual form. So they're really brilliant. The winners will be announced at the end. And there's also some prizes for them as well. But for now, we'll be displaying these throughout all of the breaks. And you can just have a look at them while you're waiting, and just, you know, just do your thing whilst you have a break. So make sure you stay tuned and come back in maybe about 3 to 5 minutes. We should be back and ready for our next session. So see you then.